Toppling empires is nothing new. Stories like the Trojan Horse or the Great Mongol Expanse tell tales of massive feats done by conquerors in the name of war and expansion. But there's one that sticks out in my mind that I think a lot of people overlook. I bet you haven't heard of the Scythians. When Greek historians spoke of wild horsemen sweeping down from the edge of the world, they were describing the Scythians, archer nomads who flourished on the great Eurasian steppe from roughly the 9th to the 2nd centuries BCE. Herodotus called them invincible, while later Roman authors credited them with redefining mounted warfare. They dressed in felt and leather, slept under the open sky, and wielded a short, powerful composite bow that could skewer a foe at full gallop. More startling still, their women sometimes fought beside the men, giving rise to Greek tales of Amazons. Yet the Scythians were not merely a romantic curiosity. Around 530 BCE, they confronted Cyrus II, the charismatic founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and according to multiple classical sources, destroyed his army and killed the great king himself. That clash, often dramatized in legend as the battle between Cyrus and the Scythian queen Tomyris, marked the first catastrophic setback for Earth's mightiest superstate. From that moment, the steppes earned a reputation as a geopolitical minefield where seemingly humble nomads could decapitate empires. Despite their importance, the Scythians rarely headline world history surveys. Their story lies scattered across Greek texts, Persian inscriptions, and, most evocatively, the gold-filled burial mounds called kurgans that dot the Ukrainian and Kazakh plains. Archaeologists prying open these tumuli have recovered brilliantly worked jewelry, still-sharp arrows, tattooed mummies preserved in permafrost, and even cannabis burners hinting at ritual intoxication. Such finds reveal a vibrant culture, the first to master full-time mounted archery, the first to run a trans-Eurasian trade in furs and metal, and arguably the first steppe federation to intimidate settled kingdoms on a continental scale. Over the next 9 sections, we'll gallop through Scythian origins, dissect their warcraft, meet the queen who may have felled Cyrus, explore their dealings with Greece and Persia, sift the clues left in frozen tombs, and track their eventual eclipse by new steppe rivals. By the end, you'll see why the Scythians deserve a spotlight alongside Spartans, Persians, and Romans. Unconventional warriors who proved that speed, flexibility, and psychological shock could topple the mightiest of empires. Long before Herodotus wrote his histories, Indo-Iranian-speaking herders roamed the semi-arid belt, stretching from the Urals to the Altai. Archaeologists tag their late Bronze Age material as Andronovo, a culture of wagon burials, bronze horse bits, and stock-raising economies. Sometime in the 9th to 8th centuries BCE, climatic shifts and technological leaps, notably the perfected composite bow and the iron-scythed horse bit, spurred migrations westward toward the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Here, herding clans coalesced into what the Assyrians later called Ashkuza, and the Persian Saka, names we fold into the blanket term Scythian. Unlike grain kingdoms bound to rivers, Scythians centered life on mobility. Their wagons hauled felt tents. Their herds, horses, sheep, and some cattle were both food source and currency. Linguistically, they spoke an Eastern Iranian tongue. Genetically, recent ancient DNA projects reveal a mix of Yamnaya-derived steppe ancestry and Siberian strains, underscoring just how fluid Eurasia's grasslands were. By the 7th century BCE, Assyrian tablets report mounted raiders striking deep into Near Eastern frontiers. One inscription laments that Ashkuza forces shot arrows like driving rain, an early hint of composite bow dominance. Their homeland crystallized into 3 broad zones: Royal Scythia, the lower Dnepr steppe, modern Ukraine and southern Russia, ruled by a high king who exacted tribute. 4 steppe tribes farther north, mediating fur trade with Baltic Finno-Ugric peoples. Eastern Saka stepping towards Central Asia, soon to menace Persia. Control of the narrow choke point between the Black Sea and Caucasus let Scythians tax trade from Greece, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia, while their seasonal migrations forged the perfect network for rumor, diplomacy, and sudden war. Mounted scouts ranged hundreds of kilometers in days, relaying intelligence faster than any foot courier could hope. In essence, Geography and technology conspired to birth the quintessential horse archers, masters of the world's longest natural highway, the grass ocean of Eurasia. Herodotus offers tantalizing glimpses. Scythians drank fermented mare's milk, kumis, practiced ritual cannabis fumigations that made them howl with pleasure, and tattooed swirling animal motifs onto skin. Skeletal finds back him up. Spiral tattoos preserve under Siberian ice, and chemical traces of cannabis linger in wooden dabbings inside bronze cauldrons. Atop society sat a royal clan, buried under the largest kurgans with gold pectorals, Greek-imported amphorae, and sacrificed retainers. Below them, warrior pastoralists formed extended families that could muster as cavalry bands when summoned. Prisoners of war became slaves, tending herds while owners ranged for new plunder. Roughly 20% of Scythian female graves include full weapon sets: arrowheads, battle axes, even armor. Osteological studies reveal arrow wounds and riding stress on their pelvises akin to male counterparts. Some graves pair a young woman with a child and a quiver, underscoring that motherhood and warfare were not mutually exclusive. These realities likely seeded Greek legends of Amazons who lived beyond the Black Sea. Far from myth, Scythian society permitted female combatants, especially when population pressures demanded every archer in the saddle. The Scythians worshipped deities tied to nature's raw forces: Tabidi, a hearth goddess akin to Hestia, Papaios, a sky father, and sword-personified war gods. A ritual specialist, the NRA, wore women's garments and entered trances to divine fate, blurring gender norms and hinting at a shamanic substratum. Sacral kingship demanded periodic bloodletting. Captive warriors were sacrificed. Wine mixed with blood was shared among nobles to seal oaths. Horses were life. Hides became tents, bones toggles, sinew bowstrings. Herd migrations followed circular routes between winter river valleys and summer uplands. Trade caravans from Greek colonies at Olbia or Tyras swapped wine, ceramics, and luxury metalwork for grain and animal products. Steppe artisans, inspired, forged brilliant animal-style gold plaques, galloping stags, snarling panthers, that later dazzled excavators. In sum, Scythian culture fused pragmatism with flamboyant display, egalitarian mobility with stark warrior aristocracy, and female agency with shamanic mystique, ingredients that would confound more rigid imperial armies built on infantry drill and walled cities. The signature Scythian weapon was a short, reflex-recurve composite bow, wood core, horn on the belly for compression, sinew on the back for tension, capable of punching arrows through bronze at 150 meters. Compact size let archers twist in the saddle and release while retreating, a tactic later perfected by Huns and Mongols. Arrows, barbed trilobate iron, carried in leather goritos, combined bow case and quiver, slung from the belt. Some heads were deliberately left unriveted, shattering inside flesh to worsen wounds. Melee arms, the Akanakis short sword for close work, a Sagoris, light axe, or pick for piercing helmets. Armor, scale corselets of iron or hardened leather, sometimes overlaid with golden animal plaques for intimidation. Helmets ranged from simple conical caps to repoussé bronze pieces sporting crest plates. Scythians mastered the Parthian shot, feigned retreat, then a 180-degree torso twist to fire backward at chasing foes. They seldom besieged. Instead, they ravaged supply lines, burned crops, and melted into grass. Infantry columns found themselves shadow-boxed by swarms that never offered set-piece battle unless terrain favored cavalry. Herodotus records that Scythians collected enemy scalps, turning them into napkin-soft drinking skins. Horsetails braided with human hair decorated quivers. Flayed enemy hands served as quiver covers. While classical writers might exaggerate, such terror artifacts served a strategic aim. Spook settled foes unused to mobile brutality. A Scythian column needed no baggage train. Mares provided milk, blood for emergency sustenance, and meat during campaigns. Their camp could travel 100 kilometers in a day, outrunning heavy infantry states. Supply independence let them project raids deep into Assyria, Media, and Persia's satrapies, defining a style of nomad war that would echo in later steppe empires. Assyrian annals under Esarhaddon, Chu Imwe Odj 681 to 669. BCE note punitive campaigns against Ashkuza raiders around Lake Urmia. Yet within decades, political tables turned. A Scythian king named Ishbakaya forged alliances with Cimmerian cousins and Median rebels. Together, they harassed Assyria's frontiers, forcing Nineveh to juggle northern defense even as Babylon smoldered. At one point, Scythian chiefs entered Assyrian service as mercenaries, classic nomad pragmatism, before switching sides again when tribute lapsed. Most tellingly, cuneiform fragments mention a Scythian overlord Madius, who swept through Anatolia circa 630 BCE, sacking the Phrygian capital and plundering as far south as Palestine. Greek tradition says they reached the borders of Egypt, where Pharaoh Psamtik I bought them off with gifts and entreaties. For almost 3 decades, a loose Scythian hegemony hovered over the collapsing Assyro-Median power balance, demonstrating how hit-and-run cavalry could humble ironclad infantries and high walls through economic attrition and terror. Ultimately, Median king Cyaxares reputedly treacherously slew Scythian chieftains at a feast, tipping the balance back. Yet the steppe riders had made their point. Empire in the Fertile Crescent was no guarantee of frontier security. They left a template of asymmetric warfare that Persia itself would soon taste on an even grander stage. Around 530 BCE, Cyrus II, who had stitched together Persia's vast empire, marched northeast to subdue the Massagetæ, an eastern Scythian confederation beyond the Oxus River. Herodotus paints the dramatic clash as a duel between the mightiest monarch alive and the indomitable Queen Tomyris, widow of Massagetæ King Spargapises. Cyrus, deploying ruses and fortified camps, captured Tomyris' son, prompting the enraged queen to challenge him to open battle. Ancient accounts diverge on tactics, but consensus states the Massagetæ prevailed, and Cyrus fell in combat, decapitated, his head allegedly stuffed into a wineskin of blood at Tomyris' command. Drink your fill of that which you thirsted for. While Persian records stay silent, the Achaemenid line clearly lost its founding genius on the steppe frontier, confirming nomad lethality. Persia soon regrouped under Cambyses and Darius, yet the shock lingered. Even the world's most sophisticated infantry-cavalry hybrid army could crumble against decentralized horse-archer coalitions adept at spatial warfare. For Scythians writ large, the episode became legendary proof that steppe autonomy trumped imperial hubris. Greek playwrights dramatized the Amazon-like queen. Medieval Persian poets, too, told of Cyrus's tragic overreach. In realpolitik terms, Cyrus's defeat bought the Western royal Scythians breathing room. The Persians never again tried wholesale conquest north of the Black Sea, choosing instead to bribe or enlist Saka as auxiliary cavalry. In a single savage battle, unconventional nomad strategy had humbled the architect of an empire, demonstrating the precariousness of settled power when confronted by mobile archers who shunned fixed lines. While Persians fought, the Greek polis along the Black Sea littoral, Olbia, Chersonesus, Panticapaeum, thrived on commerce with Scythian clans. Grain and salted fish flowed south. Greek pottery, wine, and silver traveled north. Mutual benefit tempered hostilities, but cultural misunderstanding remained rife. Greeks painted Scythians as exotic barbarians addicted to hemp smoke, yet also hired them. Scythian archers patrolled Athens as hired constabulary in the 5th century BCE, their tasseled caps and recurved bows a familiar sight in the agora. Intellectually, Scythian motifs seeped into Greek art. The griffon gripping stag scene appears on Attic vases. Conversely, steppe elites adopted Greek metalwork, bearing imported amphorae and kurgans, perhaps symbolically feeding the dead with foreign luxuries. This fusion birthed a rich Greco-Scythian art style, visible in the famous gold comb from Saloka Kurgan, where 3 warriors, Greek musculature, Scythian dress, struggle beneath filigree. Tensions flared when Scythian king Aetius pushed westward, clashing with Philip II of Macedon in 339 BCE. Philip's pike phalanx eventually killed Aetius, but Macedonian advance halted at the Danube. Alexander later chose Asian conquests over risky steppe campaigns. The story reaffirmed a strategic constant. hoplites or phalangites could not easily sustain supply lines in the endless grass. Thus, trade and diplomacy generally replaced conquest, knitting a cosmopolitan frontier where merchants, mercenaries, and mythmakers mingled under the watchful eyes of nomad cavalry. By the late 4th to 3rd centuries BCE, archaeology shows a concentration of power in lower Dnieper river basins. Monumental kurgans like Chertomlik, 19 meters high, and Tolstaya Mogila bristle with gold appliques, imported amphorae numbering in the hundreds, Persian-style ibex grip swords, and even silk traces from China, evidence of trans-Eurasian exchange a century before the formal Silk Road. Royal chieftains orchestrated tribute networks, forest-steppe fur and honey flowed south. In return, nobles sent back Mediterranean luxuries, reinforcing social stratification. Diplomatic marriages, alliances with Thracian or Sarmatian neighbors, creating a multi-layered frontier buffer. Seasonal councils at river confluences where lesser chiefs pledged loyalty amid ritual feasting, horse sacrifices, and oath-drinking from gold rida. These semi-state structures enabled Scythia to field tens of thousands of horse archers when threatened. The Roman historian Strabo later remarked on their ability to appear like a whirlwind and vanish like smoke, testament to logistical flexibility. Yet the very decentralization that defended them from conquest also hampered sustained administrative control. Overexpansion, plus the lure of foreign goods, made settled farming along river valleys attractive. Some Scythians gradually adopted agriculture, diluting nomad cohesion. Still, for roughly 2 centuries after Alexander, Royal Scythia dominated the Pontic steppe, policing trade routes and projecting fear deep into the Balkans. Hellenistic kingdoms opted for diplomacy, gifting silver discs and marriage ties rather than risking cavalry annihilation. Goldsmith workshops thrived, minting iconic spiral torque necklaces and pectorals that still awe modern museum goers. This golden zenith, however, sowed seeds of vulnerability. Conspicuous wealth painted targets on kurgans, while emergent Sarmatian clans learned Scythian tactics and looked hungrily on their past mentors. Many of the richest insights into Scythian life come not from texts, but from burial mounds stretching from Ukraine's Dnieper to Siberia's Altai. In the 20th century, Soviet archaeologist Sergei Rudenko excavated the Pazyryk kurgans, 5th to 3rd centuries BCE. Permafrost had locked tomb chambers in ice, preserving felled timber ceilings, gaily colored felt carpets, and mummies with intricate animal tattoos spiraling down their limbs. Heat-stitched saddles, collapsible yurt poles, even a 2,400-year-old bridled horse, hide intact, lay next to chieftains, providing a frozen time capsule. Modern CT scans reveal arrowheads lodged in ribs, confirming battle deaths. Isotope analysis of horse teeth charts seasonal migration patterns, proving literary claims of long-range nomadism. Ancient DNA labs, decoding genomes from these remains, link Scythians to later Sarmatians and partially to modern Pontic steppe peoples, tightening the thread of continuity. Spectacular gold artifacts like the Kuloba pectoral, 1.2 kilograms of pure gold, depict 3 tiers: cosmic griffins at top, mortal horsemen in the middle, and fertility motifs below, a portable cosmology. Such artistry required specialized artisans, likely settled near Greek colonies, hinting at hybrid craft economies. Even humble objects, birch bark quivers, carved bone games, testify to everyday joys amid rugged life. Crucially, female warrior graves with arrow kits and riding gear overturn earlier dismissal of Amazons as pure myth. These discoveries reshape gender narratives for ancient militaries, showing steppe societies valued martial skill over rigid patriarchy. The archaeological surge continues. Satellite imaging now pinpoints hundreds of untouched kurgans, promising new secrets about diet, disease, and trade when future teams brave political and climatic hurdles. By the 2nd century BCE, pressures mounted on royal Scythia from multiple fronts. Sarmatian migration, related Iranian-speaking nomads armed with longer lances and cataphract armor rolled west from the Volga, seizing pasture and subjugating enclaves. Hellenistic Roman encroachment. Bosporan kings, later allied to Rome, fortified coastal zones, curbing Scythian trade leverage. Sedentarization. Wealthy Scythian elites started tilling river terraces, losing nomad mobility. Their herds thinned, agility shrank. A rump Scythian kingdom clung to Crimea and the lower Dnieper into the 3rd century CE, but it operated more like a mixed farming polity, hiring Sarmatian mercenaries and minting coins bearing Greek legends. Eventually, Goths, Huns, and Slavs inundated the region, folding remaining Scytho-Sarmatian groups into new ethnies. Yet the Scythian legacy endured. Medieval Persians still used Saka poetically for northern horsemen. Byzantine chroniclers recycled Scythian as shorthand for any steppe raider, from Huns to Cumans. Martial techniques, composite bows, hit-and-run raids, female riders, echoed in later nomad empires right up to the Mongols. Even myths persisted. Renaissance scholars, reading Herodotus, romanticized Amazons and sky-worshipping Scythians as primal Europeans. Modern Ukraine invokes Scythian gold in national museums. Kazakhstan claims the Pazyryk Golden Man as a proto-Kazakh hero. In death, as in life, these unconventional warriors continue to topple assumptions about gender, state power, and the supposed supremacy of settled empires. The Scythians never forged marble palaces or penned libraries of philosophy. Wind erased their hoofprints almost as soon as they rode. Yet for 800 years, they dictated fear and fascination from the Danube to the Altai. They pioneered full-scale mounted archery, mobilizing entire societies into cavalry that outsped supply lines and outthought rigid infantry arrays. They cultivated trade arteries across thousands of kilometers, shuttling gold, furs, and ideas between Greece, Persia, and China long before Silk Road caravans were formalized. They empowered women to ride and fight, wove shamanic visionaries into governance, and turned burials into riotous galleries of animal-style art. Most dramatically, they humbled the Achaemenid founder Cyrus, proof that speed, adaptability, and psychological warfare can smash even history's grandest imperial blueprints. Their confrontation forced great powers to reckon with the steppe. Persia chose negotiation or limited raids thereafter. Later, Rome and Byzantium built fortifications along the Danube, realizing cavalry clouds could descend without warning. Archaeology's recent revival, ice mummy tattoos, mass spectrometry horse diets, and genome sequencing confirms what Herodotus only hinted. Scythian culture was sophisticated, wide-ranging, and influential, not merely a footnote to Greek exploits. Their descendants, whether absorbed into Sarmatians, Alans, or other steppe confederations, carried forward composite bows and mobile tactics that resurfaced in Hunnic and Mongol waves, altering Eurasia's destiny repeatedly. Understanding the Scythians thus reframes world history. They remind us that power doesn't always reside in stone walls or bureaucratic ledgers. Sometimes it gallops on hairy ponies, loosing arrows from beyond effective counterfire, vanishing when conventional armies seek pitched battle. They illustrate how cultures deemed barbarian by literate neighbors can nurture exquisite artistry and gender norms startlingly progressive for their age, and they prove that even an empire builder like Cyrus the Great, lionized on monuments from Iran to the UN headquarters, was vulnerable to a queen who marshaled unconventional warriors in trackless grasslands. Today, as we sift gold pectorals or gaze at X-rayed tattoos under museum lights, we feel the lingering hum of hooves across the steppe. The Scythian bowstring is long silent, yet its reverberation still echoes in military doctrine, in legends of Amazons and wandering sages, and in every reminder that history often turns on the daring tactics of peoples who never built a single city wall, but could ride around their enemies forever.